Chief, first of all, can you update us on the most recent double homicide, what you know as of now, because we have very, very limited information.
As of right now, we have no other information to share. It's an active and ongoing investigation, and we have a team of detectives dedicated to it right now.
Do you know, Chief, are these recent shootings over the last week related?
I can't comment on the specifics of the case, but oftentimes we find that shootings are related. I don't really know the nature of all these at this time.
Okay, so some of them could be related.
They possibly could be.
Any idea, Chief, why the spike in shootings over the last week or so?
I can't explain why there's been a spike in it. These things do tend to run in cycles at times. A lot of them, I don't know if these are retaliation related, but sometimes when you do have one group that shoots at another, then it does tend to escalate. So that's what we're trying to get out here a little bit ahead of it and try to prevent this from happening.
Is this gang related?
We don't know if all of these are gang related, but some of the shootings in the recent weeks have been gang related.
Because we heard this morning just from folks on the street that there's sort of a group on this side and then there's a group to the north on the other side of Palm Beach Lakes that kind of go back and forth with each other.
Yeah, there are certain groups in these areas that do have an ongoing feud with each other. Some of these feuds are sometimes over territory. Sometimes they're over something as silly as a fight in a club or over a girl. So, yes, there are some groups currently right now that are feuding with each other.
And when we hear gangs, there's a certain concept that comes to mind. Are these organized gangs or are these just young friends that form a little gang? Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, oftentimes what you do is you hear the term gang and you hear the term cliques. Sometimes people use those. When you or I or most people think of gangs, we think of something like the Crips, the Bloods, MS-13, things like that are very well organized, they have a very good structure, and they have leadership. It's almost, some of them are like paramilitary organizations. What we deal with a lot in Palm Beach County, we call them cliques, which they are gangs. They're usually smaller, maybe 12 to 14 people in them. They usually have some hangers-on, and it's usually kind of hard to identify them, but they usually hang out in different neighborhoods. So a lot of the names of the gangs are actually the little regions where they're from.
Okay, so these aren't big organized gangs.
No, they tend to be smaller. They sometimes lack a true leader, as you've seen a lot of gangs, but they are here and they're a real threat.
What do you make of the fact that so many of these victims and suspects are so young? Some of them even teenagers.
You know, I've been here 28 years, and it seems like we used to deal with a lot of folks in the 17 to 19 to 20 range. Now it's down to 14 to 17. It's very disheartening. We try to do so many things with the youth, all the programs we do between reduction, intervention, prevention, gang resistance, the Urban League. We have all these partners, and we know it's a problem. We're doing everything we can. So being here for so long, and I see something like this bubbling up, it gets very frustrating and disheartening.
We obviously see the patrols, the increased patrols in this area. Can you tell us what's going on behind the scenes, how you guys are fighting this right now?
Sure. We have actually detectives working on these things. We work with a number of agencies too. I can't say enough about Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, Riviera Beach. Since a lot of these things go across jurisdictions, we work with them very closely, as well as FBI, DEA, and ATF. And we keep the state attorney's office in tow. So it's a multifaceted approach. It's not just a West Palm thing. So we actually have a bunch of people involved in this. Now, in terms of what we're trying to do right now, we actually have 4 times more officers in these areas over the past few nights. But even with that, last night, for example, we had the shooting over here, the homicide over here. An hour beforehand, we had 2 officers arrest somebody at Grant and Tamron, which is 1 block away, for a gun violation. So even though we're out here and we're vigilant and we're visible, things like this still can happen no matter how many police you have out in the area.
We've run some of these names that we've been able to get when they're released, and a lot of them have criminal histories. I mean, are these people that your officers know?
Yes. For example, the young man that died the other day on Sappadilla, we have been in contact with him or had contact with him since age 11. He was shot when he was 13. We know he's been shot at a few more times. He was also a target the other day at 2100 Australian, and then he died the other night when someone got him up there on Sappadilla. So we know some of these folks. Even that gentleman, he was we tried to get him in the RIP program, Reduction, Intervention, Prevention, and we offer assistance as much as we can, but if people don't want help and they don't want to come forward, there's not much we can do. But we just sometimes we feel like we're spinning our wheels because there's so much out there. And like I mentioned, we work with Urban Youth Impact, the Urban League, the city has programs. We're trying to make it so if anybody wants help, we can help them.
We've been looking at the statistics, and it seems roughly that the number of shootings have doubled since last year. How do you explain that?
Well, what happens is when some of these groups start getting in feuds, then it starts to retaliation and the escalation. So what happens is it just keeps going back and forth. So whatever incident kind of precipitated some of this, like I said, I don't know which ones are related, which ones aren't. We do have an idea. So once something escalates, the retaliation escalates. So we're trying to get in there and cut it off before it even gets worse.
Do we have enough officers on the streets to handle this?
Yes, we do, but my fear is this, that even no matter how many officers you put out here, when someone wants to shoot somebody and they make up their mind to do it, they're going to do it. So we try to get as many as we can out here. I would love to have a lot more, but I don't know if that's the answer.
We talked to someone who lived downtown earlier today. Obviously, this is not downtown, but he was still concerned that it was close and that it impacts the perception of West Palm Beach as a whole. Is that a concern you have with all the development we have and all the new exciting things happening?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I don't really concern myself with perception, but I could see how that would be. My concern is just trying to make this as safe a city as possible, and things like this I don't want to ever see happen, but I do see how that can happen. It would influence perception, and we're very cognizant of that, but that's not our priority. Our priority is stopping it before it happens and investigating and to a successful conclusion after it does.
Okay. Let me just see if I have anything else written down. What about the fact that we've heard that it's difficult to get people to come forward and give you information with crimes like this? Is that a problem?
Oh, that's very accurate. Oftentimes, like the victims, that some that end up dying, they were actual victims of shootings and ag batteries before. So what we're trying to do is they won't cooperate. So sometimes you have the victims that don't cooperate, and then you have a lot of witnesses that don't want to cooperate. Even family members of some of these victims tell other family members not to cooperate. So that's a huge issue, because unless you have some sort of cooperation and somebody that can testify or come forward to give you information, you're spinning your wheels. Now, what's very frustrating is, as a police department, we try to do as much outreach as humanly possible with the community, and we try to build trust. And sometimes it's not even about trust. Sometimes people are fear of retaliation. So we try to alleviate those fears. There are ways to do things anonymously where we don't even know. Crime Stoppers is an excellent tool where you could call in for reward money and give anonymous tips. We have a tips line. You could do it anonymously, but it is a problem when you have a shooting where there's 20 people at a barbecue and there's no witnesses that'll come forward. It's a huge problem. We really need the community's help with these, or we can't do it on our own.
We hear the numbers. The people who live in West Palm hear the numbers and get somewhat alarmed. You've been here over 20 years. Can you put it into perspective for us? I mean, you as the chief, is this a real spike?
This recently is a real spike. Now, these things do happen from time to time. It's a sad part of society, but they do happen. Right now, we are having a spike. Sometimes we do tend to have spikes during the summer months. But this is something that is out of the ordinary, and it does give us concern, and that's why we're pouring all these resources in here trying to address it and asking the community for help, because we need their help.
And as we go into the weekend, is it sort of an all hands on deck kind of approach?
Yeah, we've got a lot of people up in this area. From Banyan to 25th, we have almost 20 officers up in this area for as long as we could sustain it. But the problem is you can't sustain that forever, and eventually you need to move on and do different things. So we're hoping to get this quelled, but it's more of we need a long-term solution to this, and it's not the police. We do what we can, but we can't do it on our own.
And just my last thing, I mean, you know, the mayor spoke out and you increased the patrols. When you get the call like around midnight, last night, that we've got another double, that's got to be upsetting for you.
Oh, it's very upsetting. I've been here for 28 years. I love this community. I love my job. And when things like this happen, you take it personally and you take it to heart, because you just don't want to see things like this happen. And it's like it keeps happening, it keeps happening. And we have spikes in this, and you know what you're trying to do. You know you're trying to prevent things. You know you're trying to work with the community, and you still don't get the results that you want. It becomes very disheartening, yes.
Okay.
One question.
Sure.
Latin community and the Hispanic community. Is it a concern? Are they involved in many of these shootings, gang-related, or what can you tell us about the Hispanic community here in West Palm?
In the Hispanic community in West Palm, we do have some incidents, but it's not as prevalent as the ones that we're having up here. So it's not as concentrated or prevalent in the Hispanic community. But it's something that we always are aware of, and we're always watching. We're always trying to keep ahead of things.
Are you getting good leads on the things from the past week? Are we close to an arrest?
I can't comment on that right now.
Okay. Anything else you want to say?
No, just the only thing is, number one, just thank you for coming out here. And please, anybody in that community that can help us with these, please come forward, because we can't let this continue.